I don't see any benefit of even going down the path of starting the degree. I don't know what that benefit would be other than the OldPreMeds podcast, session number 285. And welcome to the OldPreMeds podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week, where I take your questions directly from the non-traditional pre-med discussion over at premedforums.com. If you haven't gone over there to ask a question, go sign up. It's free. It's easy. Again, that's premedforums.com. Normally, I do a MCAT minute brought to you by Blueprint MCAT here at the beginning of the OldPreMeds episode, but I'm going to save it for a little bit later, and you're going to find out why here in a second. I'm going to jump right into our question today, which is all about prereqs, especially as a non-traditional student needing to go and do a post-bacc if you've already done very well in your undergrad. Our student today says, I have good grades but need prereqs. That's the title. I'm just beginning my journey to medical school and want some input. Some quick background. I graduated 7 years ago with dual degrees, both in art and design areas. Because of this, I only have one true science class, astronomy. I did very well in school with a 3.89 GPA and do well on standardized tests. I know I can get all my clinical, shadowing, volunteer hours in. I'm really just trying to figure out the best way to get all of my prerequisites in. The colleges I'm most interested in all seem to be competency-based prereqs rather than strict class lists. I can do a do-it-yourself post-bacc and get the 11 or so classes I need to do well on the MCAT, or one of the schools in my town offers biology bachelors which have the same 11 classes as requirements along with 10 or so others. Would it be beneficial to get the degree even though I don't really need to improve my GPA much? Or would it look bad to start the degree and take the MCAT, apply to medical school as soon as I can, even if it means not finishing the degree? All right, so this is probably one of the most common types of questions that I get helping non-traditional students is how do I figure out where to get my classes? What is the best route? And especially this student in a privileged situation where they don't have to fix a poor GPA from undergrad, they just need to get the prerequisites in. And I love how this student said, the 10 or so, 11 or so classes I need to do well on the MCAT, right? This student already knows that, hey, I have good grades. I'm looking at some schools that are more competency-based, meaning I don't need to make sure I have a year of Gen Chem, a year of Gen Bio, a year of physics. Right? A lot of schools are moving to more of just like, show me you're a good student, do well on the MCAT. We don't care what classes you have. A lot of schools are moving to that. But the far majority of schools still have a list of prereqs that they expect you to have coming in to medical school. And unfortunately, for students who look at schools that have more competency-based, meaning they don't have set prereqs, those students forget about the MCAT having its own set of prereqs. And it's not prereqs like, oh, you need to take this class or else you can't take the MCAT. It's you should know this information from this class to do well on the MCAT. And so they're kind of like these hidden prereqs that are associated with the MCAT. Now, luckily, the far majority overlap with medical school prereqs. So preparing for medical school prereqs helps students do well on the MCAT. It's this nice kind of kumbaya. And so what happens is a student like this will get through the process, go, you know what, I have good grades. I'm only going to apply to schools that don't have set prereqs. And then they struggle with the MCAT because they don't have those core science, they don't have the core science foundation to do well on the MCAT. Again, even though the MCAT is a reading and critical thinking test, it still tests your science foundation. You have to have that, usually, to do well on the MCAT. And so this student is asking all of the right questions. And for this student, the question really comes down to, do I need a bachelor's degree? Do I need another degree? Or can I just take these 11 or so classes that will help me prepare to do well on the MCAT? And the answer almost always, and I threw almost in there because I hate the always, and always and never, but almost always, 99.9% of the time, you don't need a bachelor's degree. You don't need a second degree, or in this case, a third degree, because they graduated with dual degrees from before. The degree doesn't mean anything to the medical schools. The classes /GPA /MCAT score are what matters from an academic standpoint. Making sure that you have the prereqs that they require, making sure that you have a GPA that gives them enough confidence that you're going to do well in medical school, and making sure you have a high enough MCAT score to give them confidence that you're going to not struggle, on your board exams. That's the three. Now, there's a lot of argument whether or not doing well on the MCAT gives actual kind of correlation to doing well on the boards. We won't go into that, but that's what medical schools are looking at, right? Prereqs, GPA for confidence of doing well in the classes in medical school, doing well on the MCAT to give them confidence you're going to do well on your board exams, and in the future, your kind of specialty board exams as well. So there's the licensing board exams and then your specialty board exams. It never ends. The tests never end. And so for this student, right, this student has it figured out. You don't need another degree. I don't see any benefit of even going down the path of starting the degree. I don't know what that benefit would be other than, and I'll put an asterisk on that, other than getting or registering as a degree-seeking student potentially gives you benefit from a financial aid standpoint and potentially gives you benefit from a class registration standpoint. A lot of undergraduate institutions will give preference to degree-seeking students and not just class takers. So a do-it-yourself post-bacc where you're just kind of picking and choosing the classes. So there may be benefit to register as if you're going to get that second degree. You take the classes you want, you take your MCAT, you stop going to class, and it's all good, right? The schools aren't going to care that you quote-unquote dropped out of your degree. That will not hurt you. Schools aren't going to care at the end of the day because a lot of students drop out of college. Anyway, you'll just be another college dropout with 2 existing degrees already. So great question. And the reason I wanted to delay the MCAT minutes by Blueprint MCAT is because this month we're talking about how many times you can take the MCAT. And this was a very important topic. When I read this question, I said, oh, this is perfect, because so many students, again, in this situation, think that they will manipulate the system in a way, play this game where they're only going to apply to the 5 or 10 schools that they can find that don't care about prereqs. And they're like, well, I'm a good student and I'm a good test taker. And they go and take the MCAT and they bomb it. They do really poorly because the MCAT yes, it's a critical thinking and analysis test, but you still need that core science thinking and logic that art and design aren't going to give you. And so remember that you can only take the MCAT 3 times a year, 4 times in 2 years, and 7 times lifetime. And that is the information for the MCAT Minute, brought to you by Blueprint MCAT. If you haven't gone over and signed up for a free account over at Blueprint MCAT, what are you waiting for? Almost every student every year who takes the MCAT signs up for a free account at Blueprint MCAT. You get access to their half-length diagnostic, their first full-length, which we've been covering on another podcast, the MCAT podcast, as well as 1,600 plus flashcards that they just introduced recently on a brand new platform. Go check them out, blueprintmcat.com. So to wrap up for this student, you don't need the degree. If it will benefit you in terms of registering for classes or financial aid, great, do it. Don't worry about not finishing it. Get the classes you need to do well on the MCAT, to satisfy prereqs for some schools that you may be applying to, and then make sure you do well on the MCAT, you keep your GPA up as high as possible, and you go and crush your application to medical school. So I wish you the best of luck. Again, if you have a question you want answered here on the OldPreMeds podcast, go to premedforms.com, register for an account over there, and ask your question. We'll talk to you real soon here on the OldPreMeds podcast. Have a great week. See you later.